Merry Christmas. I know it's early. And if you celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah. December 23rd is Festivus for the rest of us. And I think Kwanzaa was a thing at one time. Don't hear much about it these days. So tonight is part of my ongoing semester of Highland peated whiskeys. Do something a little bit different. I'm going to do the Glenlivet Peated. Nadurra. This is Glenlivet Nadurra Peated. And we're going to put it up against the Dunville's Peated. We're going to get more into that. But before I do, as I'm waiting for some people to start rolling in, let's play a little bit of festive Christmas music. Tis the season to be jolly. Get down. There we go. What would it be? What kind of season would it be if you don't have at least a little bit of seasonal Christmas music? Because I probably, if I watch anybody on the replay or even on the live stream, tune into the nope, not watching that, not listening to that. People need to lighten up. Alrighty. So let's see who I've got in the house already. Looks like we got 8 people strolling in. Mike Meyer, thanks for tuning in. Bourbon Insane, how you doing, man? It's been a while. George Sievert, thank you much for tuning in. Always wanted to try that Glenlivet. So I'll talk a little bit about. Should have got some water. I might get a water in a minute. I'll pour a little bit. So last time I was in Scotland, and I visited Glenlivet Distillery, but I actually didn't taste this whiskey at the Glenlivet Distillery. I stayed in Huntley, which is in Speyside, at a Huntley Castle Hotel. So there's a Huntley Castle. I think it was built in the 1400s, if I recall correctly. And it's sort of a ruin now, but it's really, really cool. If you watch my video, my visit to Glendronach, you'll see my photos of it and video of it. So the Huntley Castle, which is sort of a ruin, and then up the hill is the Huntley Castle Hotel. And some of the stonework that was put into building the hotel came from some of the ruins of the castle. And I guess the Duchess, who had been at the castle, was living in the hotel, and so on and so forth. Place was used, actually, I think part-time as a hospital during the war and all that. Anyway, so that's where I stayed when I was up in the Speyside. It's really, really cool to be able to stay at a castle or something close to it. Anyway, so they had a really, really good bar there, a really good restaurant. Hospitality was top-notch. The stay of the place. Now, the walls are super thick, so if you wanted internet access, they had it, but it kind of didn't really work. But, you know, if you're in an old building, old castle with the thick walls, you know, the Wi-Fi was not going to work that well. Anyway, so while at the bar, I tried the Glenlivet Nadurra Peated Cask. So this is 61.5% alcohol by volume. I tried it at the bar, really, 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 really liked it. Recommended to the owner there, always keep a bottle available on your bar because this is absolutely fantastic. Went to the distillery, tried a number of different whiskeys at Glenlivet Distillery, which were very, very, very nice. But it turned out that my favorite whiskey out of all that I had tried from Glenlivet was actually the one I had tried at the bar. So I got on my smartphone, found out, you know, can I get it at home? No sense in trying to bring a bottle home if I can get it at home. Sure enough, boom. And fairly widely available. Total Wine and More and a lot of the other shops. So I'm going to have that in one glass. Michael Hassler got my frozen burrito, which is no longer frozen and ready for consumption. There you go. George asked, did you get that at Eli's? He has it as well. In fact, I was actually dropped by and saw Eli today. There's a whiskey shop down the road from me, about a mile down the road. It's owned by a guy named Eli. It's like bourbon, whiskeys, and wine or something like that. I should know better what the name of the place is. Anyway, I drop by once a week, even if I don't buy anything. Yeah, I dropped in today. And in fact, he got a shipment of the Trayvon number 2. The number 2 of the Trayvon. So we just got those in. And I know I put in a plug and advertisement for him. But anyway, he's got some special whiskey. So if you're in the neighborhood, if you're in the Roseville area, Sacramento area, you want to check him out in Roseville. All right. Pour a little bit. And the second one is Dunville's Belfast 3 Crowns Blended Irish Whiskey. Watchman 999. How convenient. I'm drinking this very gem. Oh, cool. Dirty Dog. Thank you much for tuning in. Evening to all and to Eric. Thank you very much. Evening to you, sir. All right. So when I was working on my master's degree, I think in college too, before the semester would start, because I'm calling these now whiskey semesters rather than marathons, since it's supposed to be a study channel. Some classes, when you'd sign up for a class, and before the semester would start, they would send you an email of required reading. And they would say, this book is required to be read before the semester starts. And you're like, wow, man. Usually your first day of class, you're thinking, okay, you're going to go, hi, how you doing? They're going to give you an outline of the class. Here's the books you got to get, yada, yada, yada. Well, a couple times, man, they didn't even like wait till the semester starts. They're already dumping on homework on you before even the semester starts. Try to cram it as much. A lot of students, of course, don't read the book before the semester starts. They're like, well, I'll start reading when the semester starts. Not me. I would read the book. And guess what? Guess what they did on the very first day of the semester? To see if you had done the required reading, they would give you a quiz or an exam. And you're like, what? The first day we got a quiz? What? All right. So I'm going to give you all a quiz. We're going to have a two question quiz, sort of kick off the topic of peated whiskeys and with some accompanying video. Dirty Dog says, I bought a bottle of the Glenlivet 16 year Nadurra on a duty shelf in Wyoming. I'm interested in that one you have on your table. I've heard a few people say they didn't like it. They thought it was too ashy. I really, really liked it. In my video of the tour of share my photos of my tour of Glenlivet Distillery. This is the whiskey I review. So I could do a re-review of it. But I've technically in that video already reviewed it, which is why I thought it'd be a good time to return the bottle and try it again. Of course, recently I reviewed the Dunvilles in my Irish whiskey series. All right. So we're going to have a quiz. It's a multiple choice. It's only 2 questions. I'm doing this for 2 reasons. One, it helps the conversation. Number 2, there's some things I'm still getting used to. And one of the things I'm still getting used to is the technology of pushing things and making things pop up. And Roy does a really, really good job. Aquavit does a really good job. I'm still getting used to that. So we're going to see if this works. All right. So I'm going to put in quiz number 1. Quiz number 1. We'll see how this goes. And all righty. Hopefully you can hear me. Can you guys hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. Say yes or no. Because you don't say anything, then you can't hear me. Hopefully you can still hear me. Anyway, Pete quiz question. All right, I'll take it off. Could you guys hear me, by the way? I was talking over the slide. Could you guys hear me? Let me know. Yes? Okay, good. I'm going back to the slide. See, I'm testing this stuff out. I don't know. Okay, cool. I'm going to go back to the slide. I'll read the questions. Pete quiz question number 1. Methods of peating a whiskey include all of the following except A, drying malted barley with burning peat. B, exposing wet malted barley for smoldering. That's not, it should be exposing wet malted barley to smoldering peat. That's what it should say. Sorry, it's kind of a tough. Then air drying the barley. Anyway, so I didn't word that one well. 3, using water from a peat bog in fermentation. Or D, maturing whiskey in a cask that previously contained peated whiskey. So all of the following are methods of peating a whiskey except for one of these. Drying malted barley with burning peat, exposing wet malted barley to smoldering peat, then air drying the barley. That's what that should say. C, using water from a peat bog in fermentation. And D, maturing whiskey in a cask that previously contained peated whiskey. All right, so what do you guys say? Okay, Dustin says D. All of these are used for except for one. So which one is not used for peating a whiskey? Dustin says D, maturing whiskey in a cask that previously contained peated whiskey, except for that one. Dirty Dog says C, using water from a peat bog. Michael Bassler says B, exposing wet malted barley for which has been exposing wet malted it's supposed to be that. I'm sorry, that was poorly worded. I'm sorry about that. So Dustin wants to get technical. Dustin says D will make it taste peated, but that's not peated whiskey. I would disagree, but whatever. Using water from a peat bog in fermentation. Jason Fish says D is Nadurra. Washman 99 says D. Okay, so I'll take this slide off. Hey, at least I know the technology works. Okay. Now, if you say using a cask that previously contained peated whiskey is not peating a whiskey, both of these are called peated. All right. So here is Dunville's Belfast. It says blended whiskey, and it says it's kind of hard. It's right there, very, very small. It says peated. I don't know if you can read that or not. It says peated. The Nadurra says peated whiskey cask finish. I think the Nadurra is probably a little more clearer as to what's going on. But you can see it right there. I think the Nadurra is a little clear as to what's going on because the Dunville, unless you actually did a little bit of looking into it, you wouldn't know that they didn't use peated barley, right? You'd have to go online. Whereas the Nadurra straight up says they use a peated cask, right? So now here's the funny thing. Let's go back to our three answers. C, using water from a peat bog in fermentation. Okay. Now here's something funny. I'm going to show you something. It's a couple minutes long. There's a distillery that claims their water adds peat to their whiskey. Believe it or not, and I got a video of them saying it. There is a distillery that claims that their water also adds peat to their whiskey, and I'm going to show you the video. All right, here we go.
Okay, here we are, about 500 feet above the distillery in the hills, and this is the water supply for Lefroy. The Kilbride stream you can hear behind us, and behind that the dam and the Kilbride reservoir. 5 million gallons of water are kept in here, and this gives the distillery the supply it needs all year round. Now in the glass here, this isn't whiskey, this is the water supply. This is the liquid from the Kilbride reservoir. You can see there's a lot of sediment, a lot of colour. 15% of the flavour from the whiskey will actually come from the water supply. So it's really crucial we have a nice soft peaty water to keep the flavour profile the same. So here we are in the Kilbride stream on its way to the distillery, and this part behind us here, which you see, plays a big part in the Lefroy's history. Just over 100 years ago, in 1907, we had a water wars with our neighbours, and this was just part of a kind of overall dispute we had with them. What they did, they took the master distiller from Lefroy, they copied the size and shape of the stills, and the last part, they diverted their water supply up so that it could feed this distillery. We eventually got through this process and got the water going back to Lefroy, and one of the kind of results of that was that we bought up the land that surrounds this water supply, and just to be sure that this could never happen again. And recently this land has now been used to become the plots for the Friends of Lefroy too. So the peated water supply is one of the things that makes us unique. Another thing that is crucial to Lefroy's flavour profile is peat. And we're going to take you out to the peat beds now and show you how we cut peat here at Lefroy.
So you caught that. You caught that. If you're paying attention, type in there, what percentage of the flavor did he claim came from the water? If you caught that. What percentage of the flavor of the whiskey did he claim to be coming from the water? If you caught it. So we'll see Type in two numbers. What percentage? Have you caught that? Yeah, Dustin says 15%. Peter White says, even hearing it twice, I don't understand a word. Well, there's a Scottish accent. It's like I'm on a work Zoom call. Well, if you work in the whiskey business, there you go. There you go. Yeah. He said 15%. 15%. I'm like, holy cow. Now, okay. Now you saw I'm not picking on Lefroy. I'm a big fan of Lefroy, right? But it shows the water you see all the particles floating around in the water, and you watch that video and you're like, oh, wow, man, there's some peat in the water. And wow, they ferment, the barley, and they make the grist and then they ferment the barley. And then, wow, that shit floating around in there is going into the barley and it makes up 15%. It makes up 15% of the flavor. I'm going to tell you straight up, that's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's not true. I don't know. Watchman says, even if there's a certain ppm of peat in the water, then that doesn't add to the overall peat level in the final product. They better have a good filtration system. Michael Hassler, exactly. Man, can you imagine what kind of microbials and all these little microscopic little creatures that are living in there? Dustin says, D.H. Silv is Dustin. In case you guys don't know D.H. Silv too, his name's Dustin. Dustin says, I've heard of that less unbelievable stuff, like playing music to the barrels. Right, the Metallica. The Metallica whiskey. So yeah, there is a lot of crazy stuff that gets set up. This is water, by the way. I got me some water while that was playing. So I think it's funny. But see, and then this isn't just Lefroy, whatever. If you go tour distilleries in Kentucky, and they talk about the importance of the water, going through limestone and all that. Now, don't get me wrong, back in the day, before modern filtration systems, yeah, they had a natural filtration going through limestone, right? No, it removed iron, right? No doubt. But in modern days, you could use reverse osmosis and filter your water. So it's not a part of it. You wouldn't want that stuff into, it would probably even screw up a fermentation. Dustin says, nothing like limestone that didn't reverse osmosis filtered. Limestone does affect, I would say this, limestone does affect a vineyard. Right, we're 18 minutes into the live stream, and I finally mentioned wine. Limestone will affect the growth of grapes. Some grapes do well on limestone soil, some do not, but that's a whole nother conversation. So it does matter with grapes, but you can't taste limestone in the grapes. You can't taste a wine and go, there's some limestone in there. No. But it does affect the way the way grapes grow. Anyway, that's a whole nother. Most of Champagne is on like a lot of limestone in the southern part of England. And actually there's a small plot down in Paso Robles that's on as well. But that's one of the, all right. So I poured myself a little bit of each. Now, in one sense, this is an unfair competition because this is at 61.5. And if I recall, this is probably 40 ABV. I'm speaking Flintstone here, Fred Flintstone. Oh, 43.5, a respectable 43.5. So that's not 40. All right. Before I jump into these, just if you're a member of my Facebook group or if you look in the community section, earlier I posted a list. Someone requested a list of the whiskeys I'll be going through during this peated whiskey semester, this Highland peated whiskey semester. And so I posted a list. Well, I picked up 2 more bottles. So just to let you know, I probably won't get into these towards the end of January. Pick this up today. This is a Wolfburn, lightly peated. If you're not familiar with Wolfburn is the most northern mainland Scottish distillery. Right? Of course, Orkney and the other one I've been there, and my mind just went blank. On Orkney, and the distilleries on Orkney are higher. My mind just went blank as what the name of the other distillery is, even though I've been there. So pick this up today. Look, it's afford to get it. It says it's lightly peated. Now I just did the Ardmore lightly peated, Ardmore Legacy. So I might, even though they're both Highland, I might do a comparison. I'm kind of curious as to how lightly this is in comparison. Highland Park and begins with an S. Sorry, it's up there. So pick this up today. Scapa, thank you very much. Scapa. See, when you get older, man, you start losing it. Scapa. And there's a third distillery being built up there as well. I don't know how far along they are in the process. And then this, 15 minutes before we went live, this arrived. I ordered this one. So I got that one at a local shop, and this one just arrived like 15 minutes. FedEx just showed up. This is the Glenlivet Tofa, or Tofa, however they want to pronounce it. I'm guessing Tofa is their spelling of the Gaelic word that means peat. That's my guess. Because Turfa is an alternate word for peat. And this is the highly peated. Now, I tried this in a sample, like one of those little mini bottles years ago, but it was really, really early in my whiskey journey. So this just arrived today. I'm looking for other to add to my list of Highland peated Scotch whiskeys. All righty. Now, along the way, I don't know how many comparison videos I'll do. If I try a whiskey and I go, hey, this would be, a really good match for Corey Vrecken, a really good match for Lafroig 10, a really good match for something else, or Lagavulin, whatever, 16, then I'll do head-to-head. But really, it's the whiskeys that are determining what I'm doing head-to-head. So they'll all be close matches. All righty. So we got another quiz question coming up. And look at the chat real quick. Highland Park 21 has a nice peat punch. I just got the cask strength. I just got the Highland Park cask strength. That'll be coming up as well. And so here's the funny thing. We're talking about Highland peated whiskeys. I had someone in the comment section make a comment about Highland Park not being Highland. It's one of the islands. In a sense, I agree. In a sense, I disagree. The legal definition of the region, according to Scotch Whisky Association, is Highland Park, even though it's on an island, and they have their own peat from Orkney that they use. It's considered part of the Highlands. Myself and a whole lot of other people think that the islands really belong in their own category, that they have a distinctive characteristic that makes them different enough from the mainland Highlands that they should have their own region, but that's a whole nother argument. If Orkney gets a third distillery, they could then petition, just like Campbellton, to become another region, but who knows if that'll ever happen. The name Highland may have more economic clout than calling yourself Orkney. People are like, Orkney, what's that? Versus if you say Highland. So they may end up wanting to stay with Highland, even if they can call it Orkney, but we'll see how it goes. Dustin says, Highland Park cask strength is a bit too cheap to justify international shipping, so I'll wait till it shows up. I got a bottle of it here. I got a bottle at Total Wine & More, actually, in Sacramento. So it's here. Anyway, so on the nose. Oh, you know what? Guess what? We have another quiz question. Dustin says, the same legal group that says you can't disclose the age of whiskey in your blend. Yeah. Anyway, don't get me started on all that. All right, so another quiz question. I'm hoping to make these like a regular feature, learning stuff, but also fun. All right, so I'm going to bring up quiz question number 2, if I can find it here. All right, quiz question number 2. Peat quiz question number 2. What is peat? A, peat is the name of the guy who first dried malted barley by burning the shit from the bog. B, peat is Mother Earth's magical turds that gives peated whiskey its awesome flavor. Or C, peat, sometimes known as turf, is an accumulation of partially decayed vegetation or organic matter. All right, what is the correct answer? Scoochie Goon says A and B. Jason Fisk says B and C. George Severt says C. C, but B sounds better. Oh, Dustin says, I see no difference between B and C. C, they are all C. I want to be B. The B. Nadurra, F the what? It's excellent. CJM081. Alrighty. So the obvious answer is it's Mother Earth's magical turds. So if you got anything other than B, you were wrong. Alrighty. All right. So to follow it up, here is another video from our friends there at LIVETSREAM on peat.
We're here now at the LIVETSREAM peat beds, a very special place for us, and what we do here, this is where we cut the peats that give us the flavour in our kilns when we flavour the malted barley. So how do you cut peat? Well, you need to use tools like this here. Now this is our peat cutter here. There are other associated tools with the job, but this is the main one we use to harvest out the ground. And we just take it like this, and dig it out as such, through, it out, flop it out on the side, and then we just hopefully get the weather, not always the case in Islay, to dry it out. Roughly take about 3 months to dry out. We'll then bring it back to the distillery, we'll put it in the peat shed for storage, and that'll do us for the next year. So the peat in Islay, very different to the peat in mainland Scotland. You've got all these grassy roots and funguses decayed in here, and that's what makes the Islay peat unique. Gives LIVETSREAM the very kind of earthy, kind of medicinal flavours. These sphagnum mosses are really crucial to the flavour profile of this peat. The moisture content as well, and all of these things go together, make it very different from mainland peat, because the mainland peat in Scotland is based in the old Caledonian forest, so wood based. So instead of being kind of earthy and kind of medicinal, it tastes more kind of smoky, and that's a real difference for LIVETSREAM, and one of the things that goes to making us unique.
All right, so there is some truth there. Well, there is what he said is true, but it's not all the truth. It's not all the truth. There's more to it than that, and it's really. But basically, that latter part of what he said was what sort of made me really want to do this whole thing of comparing Highland versus Islay peated whiskies. Although in this video tonight we're doing an Irish peat versus a Highland peat, and the cask. Is probably an Islay cask for this whiskey, but I'll get that in a second. So one of the things he said is the difference between Islay peat and Highland peat. He says he talked about the Caledonian forests, which a lot of it would be in the ground, right? We're not talking about the trees next down there, but ones that have fallen over, decomposed, and have become part of the turf. That's a difference, but that's not the only. There's also more heather, Highland heather, and I don't know. I'm still reading on this, still learning about this. This is still a process, but I have been looking for something distinctive in Highland peated whiskeys that perhaps have that heather content. And it seems to me, and particularly also from Australia, I've had some peated whiskeys from Australia that had a similar component to some Highland peated whiskeys. It was almost like a honey character, but it was almost like a grassy honey character. And I'm trying to describe this accurately. And that seemed to be like a characteristic of the peat, right? Now, I got more studying to do, more empirical testing to do to sort of confirm that. But that's currently what I'm working on. Oh, I had a couple bottles from Lark Distillers from Australia that Tom R had sent me. If you guys, I haven't seen Tom R in a while, that he sent me. And that seemed to be a characteristic. All right. So peat is this or vegetal organic decaying. It's not fully decayed, and eventually peat would become coal, right, when it gets pressed long enough. But in the meantime, this peat, this magical turds of Mother Earth's magical turds, has been used as a fuel source. Now, one of the early things when I first started getting into whiskey, and I'm gonna do a little sipping and smelling. So I've been sipping, actually, and smelling. Hold on. The camera's flipped from when I'm looking. All right. So I was sipping and smelling on some return to the Dunvilles. So the Dunvilles they use a peated cask. Nadurra uses a peated cask. The peated cask, unless they're getting Connemara cask, which I know they're not, they're using a Scottish cask. So essentially, you have a Scottish peat, an echo of a Scottish peat showing up in the whiskey. And for the Glenlivet, even though they don't say so, there was a Glenlivet rep that I had talked to, and he said he wouldn't name the distillery, but he said it was also an Islay distillery. So essentially, for both these whiskeys, we're talking about the peat characteristic coming actually from Islay, from somewhere in Islay. But that's been sort of consistent in trying to get information about the source of the peat from all the Highland peated whiskeys is, for example, Lechic uses peat from Islay, right? So eventually I'm going to do the Lechic 10. And it's out in the island. It's out on an island other than the mainland, but it's still part of the Highlands. And the peat characteristics actually come from Islay. So from an academic standpoint, you might go, so what's the point, in comparing, since part of this study isn't going to work towards one of the goals, which is for me to learn the difference between Highland peat and Island peat. It's not going to work because a lot of those Highland peated whiskeys are actually used Islay peat from Port Ellen. But where they are using Highland peat, I've actually sent emails to the distilleries. Those are the ones that I'll be able to do sort of side-by-side comparison. But potentially also there may be a difference in aging in terms of where the cask spent in terms of proximity to the ocean. That may also play a characteristic difference between Highland peated whiskeys and Islay is in terms of where they're aged. But some of the Islay peated whiskeys, they are shipped to the mainland and they are aged in warehouses in the mainland and then bottled there and then distributed from there. So there are some that are aged and so forth in Islay, but there's some that are actually aged on the Highlands. Bowmore, for example, definitely on the Highlands. All right, check out the comments. Dustin says, all the more proof breaking whiskey into regions is outdated. That's a whole nother discussion worthy of having. And Dustin, maybe one of these days, you and I, you could come on and we could have that debate, but we'll save that for another time. But it does play, I agree with you, it does play one of the factors in consideration of the regions is whether or not. The reality is, even in the wine world, which wine has far more of a sense of place in the wine, the winemaker can make certain decisions they can do to make it seem more old world. Wineries, chateaus in Bordeaux can make certain decisions, try to make it seem more new world in style, and almost fool you into thinking it's from Napa versus from Bordeaux, France. So what you end up with is not an absolute rule. Highland whiskeys are like this. Islay whiskeys are like this. Lowland whiskeys are like this. There's a generality. They tend to be like this, but there are a lot of exceptions. They tend to be like Highland tend to be like this, but there are a lot of exceptions. And I think as long as, this is part of life. Too much talking, not enough drinking. Drink some Dunvilles. As long as you have out. See, if I had a co-host, I would sit while he talks, and he would sit while I talk. But I'm just going to say I can't do it. All right. Life. There are very few hard fact absolutes in life. Most have some sort of exception. Now, you can't say there are no absolutes because the statement there are no absolute is an absolute statement. That would be a self-contradiction. I'll give you an example. Come to the wine world. They haven't got every grape varietal catalog. There are somewhere they estimate between 1,500 and 3,000 grape varietals in Italy alone. That's a lot. I have a big, thick book, this thick, that catalogs every known grape varietal. It's this thick. But they haven't got no catalog. But let's just to make the math easy. Let's just call it 1,000. Let's say there are 1,000 different grape varietals. 983 of those grapes. 883 of those grapes, of the 1,000 grapes. If you take the grape and you open it up, it's a clear liquid. So out of 1,000, 900. My math is really screwed up. 983 out of 1,000. 983 out of 1,000 are clear. That means only 17 are not clear out of 1,000. All right, I got that straight. Does that make sense? All right. So 17 out of 1,000 are not clear and have a dark skin. They're called Tentier grapes. Here's what you will read constantly. Red wine gets its color from the skins. White wine is not aged, fermented on the skins. Therefore, they doesn't have any color extracted from the skin. It gets all of its color generally from the casks. That is generally true because out of the 1,000 or so grape varietals, I'm just pulling a number, that's straight. There's only like 14 to 17 that have color to it. One of them is called Alicante Boucher. So this is life. Life has these things that are mostly true, but there's a few exceptions. Right? This is life. Same thing I think goes for this would be my case for the regions for Scotland. There are some generalities for Scotland regions that they have some typical characteristics, but there's some exceptions. Now it may be, and I think Dustin would agree, it may be those differences are not natural to the place. They're the choice of the whiskey maker. And that may be true. It may be a particular region has developed a reputation for this particular style. Therefore, the producers from that region choose to make their whiskey generally according to that style. Right? So it may be more of a choice, a producer's choice than what is natural to the region. But historically, there are some differences between these regions and so on and so forth. All right. Let's get back into some whiskey. I was so looking forward. I mean, I had a great time with the Irish whiskeys, but really getting into peated whiskeys. It's cold. It's actually raining right now. We haven't gotten much rain. It's actually raining now. Last time I looked, it was like 45 degrees. It feels like it warmed up a little bit, maybe 52 degrees. Cold weather and peated whiskeys. I mean, I'm wearing this jacket, right? I got this goofy hat on my head. It's for me, I'm just in the mood for peated whiskeys. And so I've wrapped up my Irish whiskey study with this whiskey because I wanted to use it as sort of a transitional whiskey of getting back into peated whiskeys. You guys are having your own discussion. So I could have made this a third quiz question, but it just came to my head. And do you guys, so using a cask that previously contained peated whiskey can be used to give a peated character to a whiskey without using peated barley. And these are two examples. But there's another use, a reason to use a cask that previously contained peated whiskeys. Dustin, I don't know everybody in the room, but Dustin's a really knowledgeable guy. So Dustin, do you know why someone would want to use a cask with that previously contained peated whiskey other than to add peat character to a whiskey that was not made from peated barley? There is another reason why. Someone would use a cask that had peated whiskey in it. Joyce Shorty Pants, thanks for tuning in. Use a cask that once contained peated whiskey other than to add a peat character to a whiskey that was not made with peated barley. There's another reason why. And as you guys think about it, I'm going to take a sip from the Glenlivet. Now, a lot of people didn't like the Dunvilles. I like it. It's a little ashy. Justin Silva says cost savings. That's a good answer. Hadn't thought of that. That's a potential answer. That's not the one I was thinking of, but that's a potential answer. That's a potential answer. But, and this answer I actually got from Ralphie. This is actually something I got from Ralphie. Right. So I really, really like this, but let's go up against the Nadurra. So you get the tropical notes, pineapple, melon, little green apple. The smoky peaty character is more ashy, and it comes more, the way it comes up more in the back of the throat, more in the background, more underlying. It's not super integrated with the whiskey. And I'm wondering, I don't know, I've only had 2 whiskeys that were made from a aged in a cask that previously contained peated whiskeys. I'm wondering if that could be like a flag or a characteristic of something that's made that way, that just because of the way it's made, maybe it doesn't. Dirty Dog says to freshen older peat. To freshen older peat. I'd have to give that some thought, but that's not the one I have in my head. That's a good thought. That's a good thought, though. Dustin says, my thoughts are you don't want to make peated malt because you have to shut down the whole operation, but that's just to add peat flavor, right? Yeah, so to freshen an older peat. I mean, give it more oomph. Give it more oomph. Wow. I hadn't thought of that. I don't know if anybody's ever done that. That's possible. Yeah, so basically, oh, you know what? I can't. A producer doesn't come to my head. It's called double peating. Double peating, and there are some that have done that. Dustin, maybe you can. So that's called double peating, in which you take a peated, a spirit made from peated barley, and then you put it into a peated cask. And I've heard it referred to as double peating. But right now, a producer doesn't come to my head. But I know there are. I've heard whiskeys referred to as double peated. I'll have to Google it later. Dustin says, I'm not sure it would work. I mean, you have a Lagavulin 25-year-old. It isn't like any peat at all. But some might. In it. But I have seen some whiskeys referred to as double peated, and that's what they did. All right. Now I'm going to take a little sip of the Glenlivet Nadurra. One of the things I liked about the Glenlivet Nadurra, it's 62 or 61. 61.5. I like that it's cask strength. To me, it doesn't look like it has any coloring. Let me see. Small bat, no chill filtration. They don't say no added coloring, but I can't tell. By the way, if you buy one of these, they're cask strength. These can vary within. So some might be like a 1% or 2 lower. Could be a 1% higher. So, but they're real high up there. So they're not all 61.5. Wow. Mike Hosser sounds like a foul a referee would call. Double peating, free shot from the third line or whatever. It sounds like, wow. Sorry, this just lost. Wow. No, it's not a fair match. It's not a fair match because this is cask strength, but more than just the alcohol content. I mean, the fruit characteristic is like real fresh. Doing head-to-heads is great learning. You know, you put 2 things together and certain flaws or strengths will shine even more when they're compared up against something else. The fruit seems fresher and livelier and juicier, right? So similar notes in terms of lemon, lime, and pear, and tropical, and green apple, but it seemed vibrant and fresh and juicy, right? And the smoke and peat character isn't quite as ashy as the Dunville, not quite as ashy. which makes me like this even more. I really, really like this. And I don't remember how much I paid. It wasn't that, it was like 70 bucks, 70, 80 bucks. You'd have to Google it for sure. And it's widely available. So I think it has for a cask strength peated whiskey, I think it's a real high quality price ratio. Really, 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 really like this whiskey. Now, Ardbeg 10, still $46 to $55. All right. Got it. Right. But for the peat on this isn't as tense as a lot of Islay whiskeys. It's more underlying rather than super interwoven. But I still really, really like the whiskey. And I like that punch and intensity of flavor and the fruit characteristics. I really, really like that. All right. So here's the answer. Here's the answer. Let's say you're making a peated malt. Excuse me, a blended malt. You're going to make a blended malt. In case you don't know, for those who don't know, a single malt, the single in a single malt means it comes from one distillery, right? Malt means it's 100% malted barley. Single grain, and it means it's a grain other than barley, although they might use a little barley to get the enzyme to do the fermentation. Means it's corn, maize, and so forth. Something wheat, something other than barley, grain whiskeys. So single grain, you got single malt. You got a blended grain, you got blended malts. So if you're going to make a blended malt, you're taking single malts from more than one distillery, and you're going to blend them together, and you want to essentially hide the identity of that whiskey. In other words, people aren't going to be able to figure out where it came from. Or if you are an independent bottler, if you're an independent bottler and you can't reveal, or you're not going to reveal where it came from, then you can actually, let's say we bought whiskey from Ardbeg or Kalila. Let's say we bought whiskey from Kalila, right? 90% of Kalila goes into blends and it gets sold off. So we're going to buy peated whiskey from Kalila, but we don't want it to seem like a Kalila. What we're going to do is we're going to put it into a cask, right, that didn't have any whiskey in it, from Ardbeg or Laphroaig or Lagavulin. So we're using a peated cask, not primarily to add peat, but to mask the identity of Kalila. And so that's another use for a peated cask, is to sort of hide the identity of the whiskey that you're selling as an independent bottler, And I got that from Ralphie. And Ralphie isn't always right. Sometimes he shoots from the hip and he's wrong. He said something, it was an Irish whiskey. He said something really, really, really silly. He made a really silly story. And everybody commented and said, dude, just Google it. That's not right. Anyway, but I think he's right. He's right. To mask the identity, if you're an independent bottler of a peated whiskey, you use a cask and then you put that into that, and it help you figure out, I think that. And so when we buy these independent bottles of Islay, and we're like, well, it seems more kind of Laphroaig, it kind of seems like Ardbeg, it kind of seems like this, kind of, we're kind of wrestling with the identity of where the original was. One of the reasons why it may be difficult to actually really pin it down is because they're using a cask from another distillery, and they're imparting some of the identity from that cask with this. So they're actually marrying two distilleries to mask some of the identity. And yet, because it's distilled, here's the funny thing, even though it's independent bottled, even though it's using a cask from another distillery and picking up characteristics from another distillery, because it's a single distillation from one distillery, they could still call it a single malt. So even though some of its identity, let's say take a Kalila, and it's aged, and we're gonna put it into an Ardbeg cask, they can still call it a single malt because it's distilled in one distillation. Even though some of its identity, turns that peat characteristic, is actually coming from Ardbeg, but it's coming from the cask, not from the distillation. There you go. So I think it was, get my brain to work, Port Port, not Port Ellen, the other port, the northern port on Isla. Askeag. I think, if I recall correctly, again, don't quote me on this, I think it was actually Port Askeag that Rafi was talking about, that they used casks to sort of hide the identity of the whiskey coming from because they're like neighboring Kalila, right? They're just south of Kalila. So they buy Kalila whiskey and then put into a cask from another distillery to help sort of mirage. Anyway, really, really interesting. Now, of course, distilleries don't put this on the website. The independent bottlers do not put this on the website. The only way you get this information is if you know somebody and people talk. So if you're over there and you're talking to people work in industry, people work at the distilleries, and they kind of leak some of this information, that's where you're going to get it, right? Because it probably for contractual reasons, you can't even put it on the bottle and you can't put it on the website and all the rest of that. Dustin says, I'm willing to bet there's an exception for wet casks. Exception for what? Yeah, so Jack says, if you cast this wet, you can't help but get a little. Absolutely. Michael Hosser says, we know Erik Wait. Get the insider information from Erik Wait. White cask says, doesn't make it no longer a single malt. Dustin, you're correct. It's right. Yeah, Dustin, you're correct. In fact, Teeling, their wine casks, they get wet wine casks. And they get, and so they're imparting some wine, actually just straight up wine into the whiskey, extracting from the cask because they get wet wine casks. But that doesn't violate it being called whiskey, right? Even though they're extracting a little bit of more wine than you normally would get out of those casks. So Dustin, you're right. So, hands down, the winner. Again, this is like Mike Tyson going up against Pee Wee Herman. All right. Hands down, the Glenlivet is the winner. But it is interesting to compare them and sort of, yeah, there's all the fruit flavor and the freshness and the vibrancy of the whiskeys and all that. But compare, how does the peat characteristic come across? Is there a similarity in the way that peat comes across, smoke comes across? I would say somewhat, in that it's not, neither one of these is the peat characteristic like this. It's much more, here's the whiskey and here's the peat. It's more of an underlying kind of a character rather than super interwoven. And so, and that's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is, you know? And so, Michael Hosser says Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. That I would pay money to see. I think just because of the way it's mature and the way it doesn't get super integrated, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. So what you get is more of the fresh fruit character, and then the peat and the smoke on the Nadurra is sort of an echo, sort of a background characteristic. And the same thing with this. The main difference is I think there's more freshness in the Glenlivet. So that's one of the, I would say the primary reason why I like it better, but there's a similarity in which the peat and smoke itself comes across on the palate. Even qualitatively, they're somewhat similar. Just if you can ignore everything else and just pay attention to the peat, they're somewhat similar on that, but really, really nice. They're both very nice whiskeys. This one, $70, $80. And if I recall correctly, I'm going from memory, I think this was like 41. I think I paid $41, $42. So there's a price difference. You know, you're paying probably twice as much for the Glenlivet as you are for the Dunville. So that's another factor to take into consideration as well. All right. So got about 6 minutes left. I'm just now getting back into doing live streams, regular live streams. My goal to be consistent in doing live streams is challenging because the rest of your life interferes. And sometimes Friday night, you get home from work, you're just tired. You don't feel like doing it. But my goal is to claim this time spot in a sense. Not that nobody else can go live, but this is my time slot. If you do it regularly, then people go, Erik goes live at this time slot. Jason Mash and Drum, he goes live at his time slot. Scotch 4 Dummies, they go live at their time slot on Thursdays, right? People have the regular time slot. You get known for that until people show up. My goal is to make this my regular time slot. I prefer Friday nights or Saturdays because I don't have to worry about getting up in the morning to go to work. So that's the number one reason I like Friday nights. It's a good way to end the week. You stressful week, I work all week. I actually didn't work today, but you got a long week, end of the week, he said with Malt Muser. Sorry, never heard of him. Sorry. Brandon Knight, thanks for tuning in, but I'm getting ready to wind it down. Something else I know I've done on my channel, it's still in experimental mode, but I'm having fun with it and I'm learning from it. I started doing these shorts. Now, YouTube had a thing called stories. In order to do stories, I think you had to have 10,000 subscribers. I don't remember what the number was, but I never had the number. Anybody can do shorts, right? So that levels the playing field. But what YouTube is doing is they're competing against TikTok. And I already explained this on my Facebook group. So if you're a member of my Facebook group, you already heard me say this. My apologies for repeating myself. They're competing against TikTok, being the short 1-minute format. TikTok became illegal or whatever in India. Therefore, they roll this feature out first in India. I heard about it. I'm like, okay. Hey, Ron, thank you very much for tuning in. Just getting ready to wind it down. So, YouTube rolled this out as a feature. Anybody can do it. It has some weird restrictions. It has to be under a minute. And technically, it needs to be 58 seconds. But it has to be under 58 seconds or less. You have to record it vertically like this. You can't, not like this. If you put it, you have to put it in the hashtag shorts. So the hashtag shorts is at the end of the title, as well as in the description box down below. And then it'll get put into a unique place within YouTube, separate from your channel. Yeah, it'll be on your channel, but it'll also be in this thing called the shelf. Right now, there are only 2 people doing whiskey shorts formats, myself and a guy in Germany, and I'm putting one out every single day. So if you search on YouTube, whiskey hashtag shorts, most of what you're going to see are my videos. Being concise, to the point, and is a skill. It requires a great deal of editing, requires a great deal of planning. So this is still a work in progress. Learning how to be short, concise, and boom. But I'm really working on how to do this well and put out a video every day, short format, as well as still continue to do 2 regular videos. And I generally post one on the weekend and then one in the midweek. So it's weekend and Saturday. So my regular series of peated Highland single malt Scotch whiskies, those will be the weekend and Wednesdays. And then my dailies, currently I'm doing an advent calendar. A lot of people doing advent calendars these days. This is my first time for doing one. George and Amy gifted me, it's sitting on the shelf over here, a box of minis. Thus far, they look like they're all from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. All of them have been superb whiskeys. I mean, just phenomenal cask strength whiskeys. So I thought, this is good opportunities for the season, learn how to do the short format, put out short little videos. But after Christmas, I'm going to continue doing shorts, but I'm going to change. They're not just necessarily going to be like 1-minute whiskey reviews, although that'll be there as well. I'm going to do like 1-minute informational videos. And I created a playlist for these. I call the playlist Wee Drams. Wee short, get it, small. And so they're all going to go in there. Basically what I'll be doing, I'm taking another sip. I'm getting a little dry. That is good. Hey, Dustin. Dustin, do you have one of my coins? Have you got one of my coins? Just wondering. Have you got one of my coins? Anyway. So, in preparing and studying for exams, wine exams, whiskey exams, you would use, you don't have a new one. Oh, so you don't have one of these? if you have my Dustin, so if you have my mailing address, my email address, you have the golden. All right, Dustin, I'm going to send you one for Christmas. Send me, if I don't have it already, send my emailing address, your mailing address at Erik Wait. Who I might have your address actually somewhere. Who.com. All right. So Dustin, send me send me your mailing address. I might already have it, and I'm gonna mail you one of my coins as a Christmas gift. And thank you for being a moderator and contributing to the show. I'm gonna send you one of my coins. I'm gonna be continuing giving these away during the holidays in my Friday live streams. I gave one last week. In fact, I mailed it out today to a gentleman in Germany, actually. I'm hoping it gets done before Christmas before Christmas comes. But yeah, send me your mailing address and I'll send you one of these new ones, send me new coins. If someone wants to buy one, through PenPal, they can send me $20 through PenPal at erikwait@yahoo.com. $20 PenPal through PenPal, erikwait.com, and I can send you one for $20. I think that'd actually make a good Christmas tree ornament, but you'd have to have a real strong Christmas tree because this sucker is really, 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 really heavy. So you need a real strong Christmas tree. So anyway, so if you've seen those shorts, that's what it's about. Is that, yeah, they show up on my channel, but they'll also show up on a shelf somewhere. And basically, for me, it's a learning skill, how to communicate short, how to introduce people to a broader audience to my channel. YouTube, because they want to compete with TikTok, is pushing these videos out. They are promoting short videos. So the way to get my more exposure, YouTube is pushing it out because I'm meeting, I think, a unique niche within the short shelf. I think I might be going to read a bigger audience. All right, so that's the reason I'm doing those. So if you're wondering why is Erik doing these little teeny weeny videos, these short 1-minute videos, that's what they're about. But I'll start covering topics. It might be a 1-minute video on 5 facts about this whiskey, 5 facts about this region, 5 facts about this aspect of production, and cover it in 1 minute. Boom, 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 boom. So in studying for exams, I would use these flashcards. What are the 6 AOCs or whatever of the hot Medoc, or something like that. What are the 5 approved grape varietals for Bordeaux? What are whatever the question is? What are the 15 sub AVAs of the Napa Valley, like that? Well, I'll make, essentially for studying purposes, I'll make 1-minute videos that will act like flashcards with facts about whiskey. So it'll be a way to learn about whiskey in 1 minute. 5 facts about this, 6, 3, whatever it is. And so that after I finish the whiskey advent calendar, that'll be the next step that I'll be doing on that. So if you're wondering what those are, that's what that's all about. Alrighty. So we're just past the top of the hour. If you are watching on the replay, I want to thank you very much for watching, particularly if you got this far along. Don't forget to hit the like. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Looks like we have 18 at the moment. And let's go out again with a little bit of Christmas music. And we'll see you again next week, same time, same place. Slanjivat. And it didn't play. Now it plays. Drink whiskey.